So the first thing we're going to look at is body gestures. It's body communication up here. But what do you do with your body is really what we're looking at. So we have 5 types of body movements. The first are emblems that directly translate words or phrases. An example would be the OK sign. Then you have illustrators, what they literally illustrate a verbal message. And that means that if you're talking about an increase in something, you use your hands to show an increase by moving your hands maybe from your waist up to your eyes. Illustrator there. Affect displays communicate emotional meaning. It's any expression of happiness, surprise, fear, anger, sadness, disgust. Just shaking your head in a very sad way is an affect display, or even putting your hand up to your forehead and just kind of leaning on it. That would be an affect display. A regulator monitors, maintains, or controls the speaking of another person. So anytime you'd hold out your hand, it wouldn't be talk to the hand. That used to be very popular, right? But now it means, hold on just a second. You don't say that. You just put your hand out there and they usually know, oh, they want me to stop talking. Or sometimes you'll do a come on motion, you know, when you kind of wave back at your own face and you say, come on, meaning go ahead, tell me the story, tell me the story. And then last is adapters, and that means you're chewing on a pencil, you're adjusting your glasses, you're scratching your head, and that you have a need, and you've got to scratch your head because it itches. And so that's the last of the 5 types of body movements. So we'll jump over to paralanguage. Even though this is going out of order, I think that it's okay if we just go on to paralanguage. Paralanguage is how you say things. It's not the words you say, it's your tone of voice. And when you were growing up, if you ever got the comment from your mother or father, I don't like your tone, what they're saying is your paralanguage is communicating disrespect, and I don't like that. So we need to make sure that we pay attention to those same vocal characteristics that I talked about when we were going over the top 10 list, and that is rate, volume, and pitch. The pitch, again, those highs and lows, and we need to just make sure that our paralanguage, which means the non-verbal characteristics of our voice, the tone and the pitch, matches truly what we want that other person to think we're thinking or feeling. So you have to be careful sometimes with paralanguage. I have a married couple in one of my classes, and this is an in-classroom class that I teach, and sometimes I think, oh my goodness, their paralanguage, the way they're saying things indicates they hate each other, when in fact, they love each other. They haven't been married that long, but it's the paralanguage that sometimes sends mixed messages. Silence, that actually does communicate, and since there's no words being spoken when we are silent, it's considered nonverbal. The functions of silence are to provide the person time to think, so they're being silent because they need to process it. To hurt, they need to grieve, or they need to, in fact, even give somebody the silent treatment, so you're actually hurting them. It may be to respond to personal anxiety. They don't know what to do. They feel anxious or shy, and so they're quiet. It may be used to prevent communication because they can tell that certain topics just aren't good to discuss and they don't want to end up in an argument. It communicates emotion. Sometimes silence, it communicates that I'm going to be uncooperative or I'm defiant. I'm not going to even talk to you right now. It can also communicate annoyance. Silence can achieve special effects. So sometimes if we use silence, it kind of has this way of saying, I'll respond when I'm ready. And it shows that I'm actually in control right now because I'm the one that's not saying anything, even though it's my turn to talk. And almost puts the other person on ice maybe and makes them a little bit nervous. And then also it's just a way of not saying anything. When you just don't have a response, there are no words to communicate, and you're just not at a place where you can talk. The next channel, and this is channel number 4, are the spatial messages. And this is how close you stand to someone. So we have 4 different distances. The first is the intimate distance. This is 0 inches to 18 inches. This indicates an intimate relationship. The next is a personal distance, and that is 1.5 feet to 4 feet. So the closer you would stand, it would show that your relationship was more personal than non-personal. Social relationships, this would be in a meeting, A smaller classroom where maybe you're in groups, that would be 4 to 12 feet. That's the space that you should maintain. And then in public relationships, we should be between 12 and 25 feet. So the question then becomes, okay, if you're in an elevator with people you do not work with, how close or far should you stand from them? Well, the closest would be about 4 feet. And if you think about that, elevators are only, what, 5 feet? It depends on the elevator. So sometimes the reason why you're so uncomfortable is there's people you don't know who should maybe be at a social distance, and instead they're at a personal distance, and that makes you somewhat uncomfortable. But be aware, everybody has their own little bubble. You can even play the game, and this is what we used to do in the classroom, where I would have somebody come to the room and I'd have them stand, and then I'd take another student and have them walk in from about 12 feet. So they'd start at the back of the room and they would walk towards that student at the front, and I would say, okay, tell me when you become uncomfortable. And if the person standing in the middle of the circle did not know the other person that was coming close to them, the distance was farther. But if it was somebody they had sat next to most of the semester, they would let that person come much closer. And that was always very interesting. One spatial message aspect that your book talks about is territory markers. And those are really interesting in order to kind of understand, what are people doing to protect their space. Putting a backpack on the chair next to you, that's a spatial message that says, I don't want you to sit here. The rule at the movie theaters, my husband always tells me, if 2 men go to the movie theater, there has to be a seat in between. I don't know why that is, but that's the spatial message that says we're not a couple, we're just friends at the movie. Strange things that people do, but nonetheless, we do them. 5th channel of nonverbal communication is facial communication. These are any facial expressions that we would make. The most popular is the smile, right? We all know that means, hello, I like you, I want to be liked, and I'd like to engage in a conversation with you. There are 5 different facial management techniques: intensify, de-intensify, neutralize, mask, and stimulate. I would urge you to read those at the top of page 147. The next category is eye communication, and eye communication, believe it or not, is extensive. It covers 2 pages and even goes on to a 3rd page in your textbook. And this is an important one to keep in mind when you're doing that Grease movie clip activity. So we have a couple of things. Is what do we use eye contact for? Well, there's several functions: to monitor feedback, to secure attention, to regulate the conversation, to signal the nature of the relationship, to signal status, and to compensate for physical distance. So if somebody's making eyes at you from across the room, they're compensating for that physical distance, and that makes them feel closer to you because it's through your eye contact that you're connecting to them. Eye contact is used to signal status and aggression. A lot of times the weaker person is being glared at. Often parents will use this technique with their children. We'll also use eye contact to communicate romantic interest, or you may use eye avoidance to indicate respect. Regulate conversation. It helps you know, okay, when is this somebody who wants to jump in? And it also usually will help me in the classroom to know when students want to ask a question or interject. To secure attention, if I want you to look at me, all I have to do is start looking at you. And eventually you'll sense my eyes on you and you'll look up. So that's how we can secure attention. And then obviously to monitor feedback. We use our eye contact to find out what nonverbal messages is the person we're speaking to sending back to us. So it's very helpful for doing that, especially when you're in public speaking. Pupil dilation is something that you should pay attention to. Again, for the Grease video clip, there's certainly some of that going on both participants' part. Next is touch communication, and we're at number 7, and that just means how we use touch and what do we use touch to communicate. It can be positive emotions, that we trust you, that we're equal, that we're in love. It could be playfulness, just that we're having a good time. You'll see this a lot with younger couples. The girl will hit the boy, and you'll just know, oh, they're playing. They're not truly angry at each other. There may also be a control aspect, so move over, hurry, stay here, do this. A lot of times when my kids were little, I remember, they'd try to run out in the street and I would grab their arm, not hard, but you would grab their arm so they wouldn't step off that corner. And that touch communication said, I care about you, but I also need you to listen to what I'm saying. There's also rituals. Shaking hands is one of these. And then task related. I have to check my son's head if he says he has a fever. Or I have to maybe rub my husband's shoulders because he's just stressed out from the day. And all of that is task related. Somebody asks me to do something and I do it through touch. There's also touch avoidance. Some of us have a touch avoidance. I can tell you when I met my husband, he was much more of a touchy-feely person than I was, and I really had to change my behavior to where we could meet in the middle, to where I didn't feel like, ugh, you're always touching me, and he didn't feel like, oh my gosh, she doesn't ever want to touch me. So you have to be somewhat of a negotiator when it comes to touching other people because they may not have the same comfort level that you do. Artifactual communication is the next channel of communication, and this consists of the clothes you wear, the jewelry, your hairstyle, perfume, cologne. Any of those are artifactual communication, So what are the type of earrings that you wear? What are the colors that you wear? There's a funny little segment on 161 about how we use colors to communicate certain phenomenon. So when you're in debt, you're in the red. When you make a profit, you're in the black. When you're sad, you're blue. When you're healthy, you're in the pink. When you're covetous, you're green with envy. To be a coward is to be yellow, and to be inexperienced is to be green. So it's funny how those verbal phrases or coin phrases actually have colors that go along with them. But that would be artifactual as well. Excuse me. And then we have temporal communication, and that concerns the use of time, how you organize it, how you react to it, and then how you communicate messages through it. So there's psychological time, and that's the emphasis you place on the past, present, or future. So in the past, you may have a reverence for the past. You relive old times, and you talk about the good old days, and so there's a certain communication about it and a certain nuance to how you communicate it. Your textbook also makes the distinction between formal time, which is seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years. However, some cultures may use seasons or phases of the moon to discuss formal time. Informal time are words that are more general, forever, immediately, soon, right away. It creates the most problems because we really don't know what that means. Of course, those are verbal messages, but still, we non-verbally can respond to those verbal messages. And then it also talks about the difference, and this is a big cultural difference, but it also can refer to how different people use time. We have a monochronic time and a polychronic time, and some people are monochronic. They'll often say the generalization, which is not always accurate, is men can only do one thing at a time, whereas women are polychronic. They're multitaskers, and that's just what the difference is between those two. But also some cultures are more comfortable with polychronic. Some cultures are not. If you're talking to them, you should only be talking to them. Where in this culture, we're starting to become much more comfortable with somebody texting on their phone while we're talking to them, which is a shame. It's going to eventually hurt our communication, but there is some beauty to having a conversation with somebody who can be monochronic. So hopefully those channels are ones that you can incorporate into your Grease movie clip. This is where you're pulling from. You're pulling from these categories. So that means if it's not on this slide, it should not be an answer to one of those Grease clips. To that one Grease clip, excuse me. And make sure that you tell me what is the function. So if there was artifactual communication, somebody was wearing something, what was the reason why they were wearing that? What function did they want that outfit to convey? If their eye contact was pupil dilation, what was the purpose of that pupil dilation? What did they want to communicate? So make sure you get both, not just the channel, but also what do you think the function of it was.